Greetings, everyone. Bismillah
Later.
ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. A'udhu billahi min shaitan ar-Rajim. Start with Surah Al-Ham. Bismillahi ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Maliki yawmiddin. Iyaka na'budu wa iyaka nasta'in. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. صدق الله العظيم. Praise be to Allah. It's an exciting time we're living in. And I mean, exciting in the sense that it's time to just come alive. It's time to come alive. And some things have happened, some synchronistic things have happened in the last couple of days that uh, confirms that, really confirms that. So let's, in our usual practice, let's get in tune. Let's get in tune. And I think that uh, effort that we've been made consistently to get in tune and to stay in tune is opening us up to what I feel is going to be shared today. So write down again at least 10 things that you had to be grateful for. And let me just suggest go inward on this one. Go inward on this. The external things, they're easy to pinpoint, but just relax and stretch a little bit and go inward on this. 10 things inwardly that you have to be grateful for. Okay. Something about going inward that if you make that a practice in your life will improve greatly. Just that experience of just giving yourself that kind of focus of allowing yourself. See, Allah allows, right? And that suggests to us that we should also allow ourselves, especially this gift, of being able to go inward like that. It's a gift from the source creator to be able to do that. To really, I know one of the many thinking people, I don't like to call them scholars, that I refer to their work sometime, Stephen Covey. He wrote a book called The Seven Habits of Highly Effective People. And he talks about the human being being able to like put his mind up in a corner of a room and look back down upon himself or herself and to think about what you're thinking about. That's a powerful, powerful gift from the source creator. And here in the last couple of days, I've had conversation with international instructor Benjamin Bilal, with some members of my family, uh, some others that I've invited to be a part of a mastermind, a thinking mastermind. Uh, and so I've been in a lot of conversation in the last couple of days, but there seemed to be been a recurring theme. And that theme happens to be what International Instructor is going to focus on today. Uh, it's about living instead of just surviving, you know. And in that regard, I actually, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, I wake up and can't get right back to sleep. And I wasn't making any real serious effort to do that, but I'm just laying there in the bed. I shared with an instructor a few minutes ago that I don't like to use the term lying in bed. And that has some implications that I want to stay clear of. But I was laying in bed, and the deep question that came to me was, you know, have you really made up your mind to live? And it was associated with some with a feed that I had gotten while I think I was on either YouTube or I don't remember which. It may have been Facebook, on one of the social media platforms, and the feed came up, and uh, it was about prostate health, whatever it's called. But anyway, it was about that, and it was of course the guy was trying to sell something. It was one of those kind of feeds. He was trying to sell something, but in order to sell it, he gave up a lot of valuable information and things I had never thought about before, and it was very meaningful to me because I had just experienced a transitioning of a very dear lifelong friend, Imam Ron Elamine out in California, and that was the thing that they identified as the main cause of his uh, physical demise. Uh, as they would call it. And so it got my attention. I paid attention to it. And one of the main things that they focused on was instead of the things that most of the wellness, I'm not talking about the health, the medical field or those health so-called but sick practitioners, not them, but the people on the wellness side, you know, that the focus is usually on uh, eating. It's usually on having a real pure diet and the things and staying away from certain, uh, which is important. And just the outward kind of things that we do to harm our whole bodies, but especially that part and the growing section of our bodies, the middle part of our body. And I'm listening to that. I said, okay, I've heard most of what he was saying. But when he got to his main point and what he was selling, he said that the main thing that not it's not focused on enough, and by most not focused on at all, is the waste that the lymph your lymph node your lymph system takes care of. He said, and he made a point. He said uh, you could eat as pure as you possibly can. It can be as alkaline as you can get. You can be doing all those things right, but you have not taken care of the ability of your body to eliminate the waste that's already in there, and you haven't opened uh, the portals for that stuff to empty out. Then all the good stuff you put in there is it's just like having your toilet back up in your house and it gets stuck. That's why it's backing up, and you might just smell it in the bathroom, but pretty soon it's going to expand. It's going to stretch, and pretty soon the whole house will be smelling like that, like the sewage in the toilet. And I want to paint that picture. It's pretty uh, vivid picture of what could happen to our bodies internally. We're talking about focusing internally now, right? And that made such a impact on me again because uh, my dear friend, his last couple of years, I was in constant contact and communication with him, and he tried everything that he could find out and heard of, and I was researching and sending people his way, and he literally tried just about everything that was out there in terms of most information that's prevalent in the wellness community and consciousness. But his body kept deteriorating. He would get better for a short period of time, and then it would take hold again until it finally, his body just couldn't take it anymore, and it finally broke down. But out of all of what we ran across and did, that was the one thing I don't recall at all that we paid any serious attention to, and that is the waste. The waste that's in our lymph system. Now, I'm not going to go into any detail with that. I'm not. I don't have those kind of skills or interests or background. I have the interest, but not the kind of skills. So we're going to hear from the gift that we have as a class, as as a movement, as a community, as an association with our illustrious uh, Karima Medina Bilal. She's much more gifted to handle that kind of thing. So I'm not going to touch that in terms of what that means and the source that it plays. But that stayed in my mind. That's my point. It stayed in my consciousness. And so I said, well, let me do some more research on that to understand what this means. Because he was just trying to sell his product, which may have been a good product. I don't know. But when I did the research, the first name that came up was Dr. Bobby Price. Now, I'm not just saying this to say that. I'm giving you a couple of suggestions, what you can trace yourself. And it's not just for men. So it's just not the prostate problem that men have, but it can cause problems for your whole body. And it can manifest different ways in women. So it's a big concern for us to really be aware of, cognizant of, conscious of what's happening internally, not in terms of what we put in it, but what goes out. And not just what we can see coming out, as we defecate and urinate, but the things that we can't see that's coming through our skin and so many other ways through our lymph system. If you're not aware of it, get aware of it and research it. It may make the difference in your sickness and the duration of your life. And we're talking about life today. So, so when I sat there in that energy of, you know, have you really made the decision to live? I had to answer no. I really, I shocked myself, but I had, in all earnest and honesty, I had to answer no, had not really made the decision to live. Now, recently, I've been very aware of decision making. Uh, I've accepted the invitation to share in a seven-part series with the young men and young women. Some of the young women also involved in this effort that we have going here in the Atlanta area right now. But I'm acting as kind of an elder, as a mentor, coach, uh, that 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 kind of responsibility to this relatively small and tight group of thinkers here in the Atlanta area. And they asked me to put on like a regular presentation to their groups. So to start off, I said, well, let's do for the next seven strong sevens. I'll do a presentation, and it will kind of reflect some of the thinking in that direction. I mentioned Stephen Covey, his book, Seven Habits of Highly Effective People. Napoleon Hill did something that was it's his thing was so packed and so dense till it's really hard to absorb and get into. But he did something also on the seven universal laws. And so I had been uh, those kinds of things were on my mind. So I said, let's do something that's going to reflect uh, what has been our main motivation as African Americans, especially as African Americans, most of whom in our association have chosen to follow the path of what we used to call Islam, but we come to realize is al-Islam, as Allah gives us in the Quran. But under the kind of environment that W.D. Farad painted for us, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad took it the next level and painted for us. Imam W.D. Muhammad painted for us. And now in our movement now with Nunetics, we're taking that baton to the next step of life. We're talking about life today, right? And there, 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 there was this reflection that really more and more was pointing inward for us, pointing inward for us. And so the thinking that we've been given in terms of being introduced to what was called, we called it that for many years, El-Fatiha, the opening of Quran. Uh, since then, of course, we have selected as a prominent idea, especially at the very beginning of that surah, Alhamdulillah, right? So Alhamd, we prefer to call it Surah Alhamd. which carries the idea of gratitude that we focus on so much. But I said, what I'll do, I'll take those seven ayat and present the same concepts that the other thinkers have presented, but take it much deeper and anchor it in the fitra. Those same concepts. So in the first session that we had, we called it or focused on purpose. And the second one we focused uh, on planning, organized planning. So let's just stop with those two. I have another one coming up this coming Wednesday. But let's focus on those two ideas, organized planning. And so what I did, I said, okay, let me look at the first ayat of Surah Al-Hamd. And so Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So what in that suggests purpose? And I never raised that kind of question before, but I had given a lot of attention in what the direction Imam W. Muhammad had given us in that evolutionary process of our thinking. He spent most of his time directing us to the concept, picking up the baton from his dad now, from do for self and establish a nation of your own and take over these three states down here in the South and all those things about living in community, life of community, right? So Imam Muhammad took the baton and he had us focus on establishing a model community. That was his main focus on everything he gave us. He was building toward that. And he wanted us to see it manifested in the life, we're talking about life, the life of community. So when I got my head wrapped around my purpose in terms of my 78 years in this carbon 12 suit, you know, and I started thinking about what's predominant thing, focused, all the things that's happened through me, to me, or from me. Just what was it all about? And what came up for me was having this focus on my concerns and looking for answers and solutions to community life, you know. And so that became my purpose. I shared it with a few of you all when I actually put that together. So what I had to do, I had to make a solid decision about my purpose, and I had to write it down. And the suggestion is that when you finally are fortunate to be gifted, not blessed, but gifted with that clarity on what your purpose is, that when after you get that, now you have the responsibility of taking that seed, because your purpose is your seed, right? And planting it. Where? In your subconscious. So it's suggested that you write it down. That's number one. You're using, that's why I say always when we talk about doing our gratitude, always suggest that you write it down. It's something very, very important in terms of how it relates to the putting these concepts in your brain, planting it firm in your garden, you know, by writing it down. So you write it down and then you read it every day and you recite it. First thing in the morning, last thing when you go to sleep at night, you recite your purpose, which was what you do. It anchors you back in your garden, and the main primary seed in your garden is what your life has reflected to you of what your purpose is. And so that decision was made. So the next step, as I was sharing these ideas and these thoughts that was being magnetized to my consciousness about this idea of purpose and my particular purpose, as I was focusing on that, then the next step was in organized planning. Again, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. The second ayat, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Now, I'm not going to go through the detail. I don't have time for that. But after looking into that as uh, the second stage of development of the community. Now, because now, I shared with Imam W.D. Muhammad. I published a book, sent it to him, that was based upon uh, the understanding and appreciation I had then of those seven ayat. Of course, I was still calling it Fatiha back then. And so I did an exhaustive uh, period of time of reflecting, focusing on community life, and said, okay, what those seven ayats suggest, and what would it look like if we had everything that would make up the life of community, educationally, politically, in terms of government, in terms of the culture, uh, across the board in terms of business and finance. If all that was seen outwardly expressed, what would that look like based upon Quranic thinking? So I took those seven ayat and did that. And I'm thinking, as well, where I kind of reason my input uh, would be, I was thinking Imam W.D. Muhammad would take that document that I shared with him, sent to him. I thought he was going to critique it and change it or give me some suggestions or and he told me go ahead with it years ago, long before he passed. And so when I got back on on this focus this time in terms of my purpose, in terms of focusing on community life, so I had made the decision on my purpose. But then that question came up after I started planning around that concept. Let me share that part with you. Okay, when I really got into this organized planning, what I realized was this universe, this earth, well, I call this spacious. This thing is so big, it's way bigger than William Saafir to wrap his head around it. So I said, you know what? Imam Muhammad told us this also. And the thinkers uh, outside of him during that same time, they were fostering an idea of called the mastermind concept, and they all point to that as a need to do anything of any significance. Our our purpose, my purpose, your purpose, each one of us have a purpose that no one else can match. Each one of us, you, yeah, yes, you, me, we have a purpose that's unique. It's all tied into the filter, it's all tied into being human, but we have a purpose that's unique to you. And your purpose is tied into the fabric of the creation itself, into the whole universe. Your purpose. So it's much bigger than you trying to do it by yourself. So I said, you know what? I need to magnetize a mastermind team. This came out of my organized planning. In order for me to accomplish my purpose that's unique to me, I need to magnetize some like thinking people, and we collectively. And I said, well, how many should it look like? I said, well, the number came to me was six, and I said, well, let's seek at least 12, but we'll settle for six, or it might be reduced to six, but that's enough. And I'm just sharing these thoughts with you because, we're talking about life, y'all. That's taking the knowledge, the good information, the inspired uh, thoughts and urges in us. How do you take that and utilize it? Allah points us to the utility of the heavens and the earth. To be aware of it, yes, but then, how do I show gratitude for being aware of it? By using it. Think about a good mother, a good father, that's working with their children, their offspring. They want to see their offspring use the guidance that the parents are equipped to give them. They want to see, they don't want to just pass it on and hear them regurgitate it. They want to see them use it in their life in terms of how they relate to themselves, how they nurture themselves, take care of themselves and their families and their neighbors and their friends and even their enemies. How do they take the knowledge, the wisdom, the understanding, and use it in their life? That's the important thing. So I said all that to come up to this question about have I made a decision to live? And I said, if I had made a decision to live, I would have each day of my life reflecting that. Meaning what? I would be showing gratitude for not only what goes into my mind, what goes into my heart, what goes into my body physically in terms of the food and drink and everything that I consume, but I would also be consciously aware and make conscious decisions about what leaves my body, the waste. The best of the thinkers in terms of self-maintenance physically, and they got it just clocked into their DNA. I can recall my grandmother and the elders during her time. Remember, I'm 78, and my grandmother and the way they lived, they just did some things that it was just in them to take care of the waste. They used to actually examine the stool to help uh, decide, what's going on inside the body. And at least once, sometimes twice a year, you had to clean your body out. I can remember that so well, boy. Castor oil. I used to hate that stuff. But at least once a year, you know, uh, we had to clean our bodies out. And they had all kind of herbs and stuff, that it was taken in between there. But it was so the focus was on growing good natural food. They just did it naturally, right in the backyard. They had their own chickens and everything, but they loved the greens and the watermelons and those kind of things, which was so nutritious. So they were taking care of what was going in, but also what was going out. So this more current, recent information that I had been exposed to about the lymph system, which I had never really considered at all. Used to heard, I heard about uh, the lymph system. Never heard it even called a system. I heard about lymph nodes, and I heard about that being a problem for some people. Several of my daughters, at least one of them, had some real serious problems with that. But I didn't know anything about it. But when I realized how important it was, and I listened to Dr. Bobby Price and some of the folks that he put on, he gave us 10 different points. One of the most important point was movement. And our international instructor Benjamin Bilal and I had a discussion at one point when we was doing the 29 modules, when we were discussing how important movement was in our life. And here recently, I shared with you all that I went on a 40-day program with my eldest son on original movement, the basic movements that we get instinctively and as a newborn baby, and that we learning how to uh, turn over, how to support ourselves, trying to lift ourselves up, and then finally being able to rock, then to crawl, then to walk, then to run. All of those basic movements, not only do they give us the physical strength and stamina that we need in our life, but they also clock the same thing in our brains. So each one of those movement is clocking the type of uh, sensitivity, awareness, the firing that needs to happen in our brain. It comes with each one of those movements, and we get away from those natural movements, even the movement in our diaphragm and our breathing. All of those things affect the brain directly and makes us gives us what I like to call an ability to optimize our life, to live the life fully. Those movements, those basic movements. So I had to think about all of that, and I'm going to pass this talking stick in just a second. But this thing was so rich. And so when I finally answered my own question about have I made a decision to live, I had to think about that when I answered the question for myself, said, no, I have not, because I have not given that kind of attention to what's the waste in my body and making sure that it gets out on a consistent basis. So I said, in terms of my decision to live, I had to decide on what I was allowing into my body and what I was allowing to leave my body. My body, my physical body, my spiritual body, my mental body, my social body, all of that. So it's all about life today, y'all. It's all about life. And I'm looking forward, as one of the learners or one of the instructors indicated a few moments ago, I'm looking forward to what's in store for us today. Sister Karima Medina Bilal, uh, I know we're trying to get away from that language, the cult language of sister and brother. But we have to, at the same time, while we're in this process of growing, evolving, we have to give ourselves a little leeway in this process, as we grow, and we get better. We're starting to use, instead of the 7 days, and call them weeks and weekends. We're getting better at calling it strong ends or strong sevens. So little by little, we're moving in that direction, and I'm grateful. I thank Allah for it. And just a moment, I'll pass this talking stick to Nawa, but I see Karima has her hand up. So yes, ma'am.
I'm going to start backwards. So, Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Um, I think it's a cultural thing with brother and sister because I remember from the Southern teaching that we grew up with, we did it as a terms of respect. We had to address every person who was older than you as sir, Mr., sister, brother, reverend, some kind of title we had to give them in terms of respect. So um, I think that's something that's been built. I'm going to say, like my cousin say, something that was built into us that we have to grow out of. Even now, when I speak to my cousin, the first thing we do is say, "Hey, cuz," right? Hi, cuz, right? And then we address them by their name. So it's something that's been built into us that we have to release. That's the part. But the second one it was talking about, I know in Atlanta that we have two groups that's recently started with the brothers because the sisters been going on for like almost 30 years where the teenagers from like I think the youngest one is from 11 up to 18 until they graduated from high school. That group, which they graduated 2 weeks ago, that's been an organization. And so now the Muslim Men's Society have started a group with the brothers, and they are doing the same thing with the sisters. I mean, with the brother. So if the sisters and the brother can match each other by the time they are teenagers, they won't have to be out there, looking for something because you already have a counterpart on the other side. You can say, okay, they are doing this, and I can see them. And as they graduate through into manhood, then the sister can say, because one of the sisters in the graduation said, "Oh, I need to be married by 26," and she had all of these plans that she wanted to do. So I'm saying, okay, brother, you got to step up because this sister's looking for a husband. By the time she's 26, right now I think she was like 14, someplace in that area. But those programs are very beneficial for our young men. So I don't know if you're speaking to that group, and that's another group that's more in terms of teaching young men skills and how to make a plan and how to work that plan even while they are in school. So I'm not sure which group, but anyway, we know New Medina been in existence for 40 years, and that's the community part that we know has been established, and it's a reflection of us in terms of community, and we are growing each year. And I know everyone has probably heard of New Medina. Okay, they just had their 40th anniversary, which was toward the end of the May, a couple of weeks ago. So we are doing things, but and to bring it home, I really didn't realize I was only surviving until I retired. And I'm saying, when Allah says leave, I'm saying, like, what am I going to do? I had no particular plans, but Allah took over and showed me this is what you're going to do. And so now I'm trying to walk in those steps and walk in that guidance. And it's opening up for me that I'm not only surviving now, I'm not in that surviving mode anymore. I'm in the mode of living. And I think that's where you are right now, that this is where we are right now. But it took me a long time because all I could do was in that survival mode, day in, day out, day in, day out, asking permission to do this, asking permission to leave, asking permission to go on vacation. All of this was just survival. And once I retired, I saw it clearly that
Okay,
this is what my life was.
let me give some little clarity. Um, what I was sharing with everyone, I was sharing that experience because uh, of the, the occurrence of synchronicity that's happened on not only with Instructor Benjamin Bilal and conversation we've had and communication we had, but also with my youngest daughter and also with some of the people that I was contacting and inviting to be a part of this mastermind that I'm magnetizing right now. Just how Allah is putting this strong urge in us to to identify and position ourselves to really be grateful in terms of each day living the life, as was designed by Source Creator. That's what I was talking about. So,
Very
uh, so let me finish the time. I'm just trying to explain what I was sharing. What we have been granted in terms of a gift in the Nunetics environment, and that's where my focus was. So what we're doing in our class right now, we have been gifted with the clarity of how do we live the human life? We live it by looking at what Allah has given us in the meaning, not only in the words, but the letters in the Quran, which leads us to the frequency even in those letters. That's what we're given in in this nunetic environment. We're able to get clarity in terms of the meaning of the guidance that Allah has given us, because this world is too big. Even in terms of my purpose in it, your purpose in it, it's too big for us. And we can see it through narrow scope. Even I mean, I love the work that's been done by there are a lot of sisters groups and brothers groups or men's groups and women's groups here in the Atlanta area. There are quite a few. And I applaud their efforts, but it's not enough. It's not close to being enough
that is
because
correct.
what it's doing is like they're like in the hamster wheel. They're going around in the same circle, and it's like being in the matrix. They haven't broken out of that. Even those who call themselves Muslims, the Muslim groups, again, I applaud them trying to do something, but it's not near enough. Why? Because Allah has given us the fitra, the universal laws that govern the whole creation, and, and we see it more clearly now in this class environment studying genetics than I've ever seen it before. And so with that kind of clarity, we have Allah says our own soul obligations. We have an obligation right now to establish our individual life, our family life, our community life based upon the fitra. So if we're not doing that, we're not close to being where we should be. Even New Medina. I was involved in a similar kind of effort in Weatherford. We owned 80 acres there. We had people there. But I eventually had to leave because they couldn't see the value in doing the kind of thing we're doing in our natives class right now. We're learning, but we're learning so that we can move from human doing to human being. My daughter asked me in a conversation we had the other day, and she was so in tune. She said, "Daddy, what is human?" So I had an opportunity then to share all the things and research that we've been doing around the word human, you know. And so she opened that door, so I was able to step into it, you know. And so we have to look at what Allah has given us in terms of the value that we have in Nunetics, and it's on my obligation, your obligation, that your soul obligates you to take your particular purpose and build on it, organize it, plan with it, build a focus on it, and take it through those stages based upon you can use Surah Al-Ham to do it, your understanding of it, and constantly take each day, each moment with that kind of focus that I'm living by doing what? By changing. The life process is one of change. It's not the one of staying the same I was last year. I have a very close friend that lives in New Medina. Been there for a long time. New Medina is not the answer. I'm sorry. I applaud the effort, but when Imam Muhammad was with us physically, he told me he visited the community that I was in, almost 80 acres. It was called Muslims United for Progress. He came and he was the guest speaker. We had two students that was graduating from my little homeschool environment. We had two students that was graduating from a couple of the families there. And he paid his way, came from Chicago to Weatherford, Ohio, and did the keynote address. But he told me that what we were doing there was not really what he had in mind in terms of a model community. And New Medina was already uh, roads, several years down the road already. So that was an answer. The closest answer that he pointed to was actually in uh, Arkansas, in Little Rock, and they was just getting started good back then, you know. But that was the closest to actually being able to pull together this kind of a unique model of community. And remember, each of the archetypes that International Instructor have been pointing us to, they are a community. So if they are a community, you are a community, and so am I. But collectively, we are pulling forth this concept of community life based upon your gift, your purpose. So that's what I was referring to. I wasn't referring to something. I know I'm aware of those other things, and I've studied them, I researched them, I've been involved in them. But no, what we're doing is so far ahead of that, man. We don't realize what Allah has given us, put in our hands. We have not demonstrated the appreciation and gratitude of what we have in our hands in this thing called Nunetics. That was my point. And that's what I meant by making a decision to live. Live how? By taking this information that Allah has given us, unfolding for us, and doing everything in our power each day to live it, to express it, to make sure that we're changing, taking the information and making sure that I'm not the same today that I was yesterday. I've taken this nunetic gift, this powerful gift, and I've advanced the life, my quality of life. I move more into living each day. And my routine, not going from one ritual to another one, no, not being a uh, becoming another sect in Islam. No, by us genuinely taking the fitra as our mother, Mother Nature, taking that and each day showing appreciation for it by using it in our life, finding some kind of way to use it, and each day getting closer and closer to allowing our outward expression of life reflect this fitra. That's what I was talking about. Big difference in what we're looking at right now. I mean, again, I applaud their effort, and I'm glad somebody's still trying. But the work that we have, it's again, um, I guess the big urge that's in my heart right now is for us to see uh, the urgency, the urgency to do what we need to do now in our life, and do that consistently.
Hey, can you see it?
We
Yes,
can.
ma'am.
Okay, good. So we're ready to go now. I was saying, I was so momentarily distressed that I didn't see the notes. I couldn't see the thing because I've been taking notes on the different things that you all have been saying. And I hope with grace to be able to weave them into my presentation for today, which is the second part of a topic I brought to your attention last week called iatrogenesis. And I love, as we're in a word and language environment, I love the idea of teaching you all medicalese. You have to learn it. If you don't learn it, then you're going to be at a loss whenever you find yourself in face to face with a provider or in a medical establishment. People will be speaking English, but the words won't make any sense to you. And since they're discussing your life and your health, the more involved and the more savvy you are, the more conversant you are in the language, the better off you will be. And our son said to me, he has an app, and that app teaches him a new word each day. He shares it with us. And so each time I'm before you, I'm going to share with you a medical word. And that way you won't be intimidated by it. You'll begin to see the commonalities between the words by understanding the roots. Same process as Nunetics, and it gets easier and easier for you as you go. So last week was iatrogenesis, the harm that's in the good. This week is iatrogenesis part 2, avoid the harm and get the good. Avoid the harm and get the good. Oh, there we go. So iatrogenesis. What is iatrogenesis? Refresher. It's a Greek word, and it means harm that is caused unintentionally by medical care itself, be it medications, procedures, testing, misdiagnosis, overdiagnosis, or even poor communication. As we proceed, I'll give you some examples of that you'll begin to see just how frequently it occurs. And with grace, you will see what you can do to prevent being affected by it or being a victim of it. So remember the basics. I will reinforce this every time we speak. Remember the basics. The human being was created, and I believe the Arabic is al al-fitra, upon the fitra. I've heard that translated as everybody was created Muslim. I think nunetically, it is more accurate upon the fitra. And what does that mean? Each organism was created to thrive in a specific environment, meaning each organism was given its fitra. The environment it lives in, the food that it must eat, how it should behave in combination and connection with all the other organisms in its environment. That is its fitra. We all have one. And believe it, as I was speaking with our son this morning about relationships, your relationship with another person means that you have your fitra and the other party has their fitra. And the two fitras are complementary. You cannot exist in an environment in which you were not created to thrive. So if your fitra is peace, if your fitra is progress, if your fitra is continuous growth and progress, and you're in an environment that stunts that or actively suppresses that, you will not thrive, and the organism, in this case, you and the relationship, will sicken, or you'll adapt, and frequently it's a maladaptation, meaning a poor or unfavorable adaptation, or you will die, or the relationship will die. So I want you to understand that these are principles that are in operation not only in your body, but in all of your bodies, right? Your physical body, your mental body, your emotional body, your spiritual body, your financial body, your relationship body, your whole ecosystem has a fitra. So once you know your fitra, then you can conduct yourself appropriately. So when you give an organism that environment in which it was created to exist, then that organism survives. Not only, it thrives. Survive means you're just there. You can be in a vegetative state and be living. You can be in a vegetative state and survive trauma, but that's not thriving. Thriving means you are making progress. You're living a robust life, right? So we can see even in these basic principles, it ties into what has been said before me. When you're deprived, or when that organism is deprived of that environment, the organism either adapts, which is what I believe firmly happens in a cancer situation. I believe that, just like I'm sitting here talking to you, it sickens and it eventually dies. Those are the basics. Keep them in mind as we proceed. So, iatrogenesis. Here we go, make that just a little smaller. All right. Strategies to avoid iatrogenesis. You use the least harmful intervention. This is where I have a bone to pick with strategies to treat cancers. You're hard-pressed to convince me that the strategies currently used to intervene in a cancerous condition are the least harmful. In matter of fact, they are very harmful in the majority of situations. You begin with lifestyle, with behavioral and conservative approaches when they're appropriate. Now, if you're having a heart attack, it's not the time to discuss eating a diet that's low in saturated fat. Person's going to die. This is not the time to speak about whether or not they should eat the Mediterranean diet or be a vegan or a carnivore, or the merits of either. At that point, you need dramatic intervention. Okay? So once the person has been taken out of danger and the person stabilized, then as they're on the mend, we can talk about what we can do to prevent, what we can do to enhance function. Avoid escalating treatment unless the benefits clearly outweigh the risks. I spoke last time about how the tendency of providers under the pressure of corporations and business models to see a person quickly, and also under the pressure the provider feels from the patient due to advertising, commercials. If you, even in streaming now, if you don't have the premium version that omits the ads, you're going to see ads for drugs for conditions. And they present those ads, those drug suggestions, in ways that are difficult for providers to contrast with eat better diet, live a better life. People want, I want this right now because they saw with their own eyes and heard with their own ears that this person on the television took this particular drug, and all of a sudden they went from having psoriasis, or they went from having panic attacks or whatever, to living a full, vibrant life, the life that you'd want to have. So they come to the provider and they press you. Well, say, well, wait a minute, you're already on drug A. Well, maybe I should take a stronger dose. Maybe I should move from this traditional drug to this more recent drug, which may or may not have additional side effects. So you have to avoid taking people up, increasing dose, or adding additional medications unless you can clearly see that doing so will give more benefit than create more harm. And then there's my personal favorite, which you rarely will hear in cases of cancers, for example. There are folks who've been given a diagnosis of let's take prostate cancer. And when a person is given a diagnosis of cancer, people become very frightened. And the provider imparts, generally speaking now, according to protocol, the provider will create an environment, even a language environment, that makes the patient feel, you got to do something right now. Like, we need to take you right now. We need to give you chemo right now. We need to give you x-rays, radiation, and surgeries right now. Well, in some cases, that's true. There are some cases where that would be the scenario. Generally speaking, though, especially in the case of a prostate cancer, it's a slow-growing cancer. It's a slow-growing cancer. Don't take my word for it. Look it up. And it's also a cancer that usually appears in later life. Now, does that mean we shouldn't care as much? No, that's not it at all. It does mean that it takes a long time, takes years for cancers to get to a point that we can pick them up diagnostically. In order for there to be a lump visible on a mammogram, has to be like 10 billion cells, some large number of millions of cells. And it's been in there growing for years frequently in the average person. So if you wait a week or 2 weeks, generally speaking, you've got that time. Now, let me give you the disclaimer as always. Everything that I'm telling you is for information and entertainment purposes. You should always take the word of your provider and your common sense and your knowledge over whatever it is I tell you, because I don't know you. I know conditions, I know diagnoses, but I don't know you. I don't have. So it puts me at a great disadvantage. So with your provider, but you cannot get the right answers unless you ask the right questions. So with grace, I'm giving you information to formulate questions that you can ask. And if you can do that, now you've got a time for the emotional aspects of things to settle down just a moment, for your adrenaline and cortisol levels to come down to a normal baseline. Because you can't think clearly when you're terrified. And few things will terrify a patient more than hearing the word cancer. So you can ask the question, what happens if we do nothing for now? And you define the now as this moment. Now, without a question, person's having a heart attack, there's been a car accident, there's been some serious trauma. Oh no, there's split-second decisions that have to be made. People die if you don't. But not with things that have been going on for years, not with conditions that a person has had for decades. You got a minute. So you can ask the question, what happens if we do nothing for now? Review medications regularly. I mentioned last session that polypharmacy, the situation in which a person is on multiple drugs at the same time, is a huge cause of death. Hundreds of thousands of people. I mentioned a book called Death by Medicine by an author named Gary Null, Null, Gary Null. And you should do yourself a favor and read the book. I'm sure it's online somewhere. He went to Congress and all manner of congressional hearings and testified about his findings. You can get that information. How do you prevent polypharmacy when the average person, 65 years and better, is on 5-6 medications? We had a family member who was hospitalized, and I was convinced that he was hospitalized because of an effect of one of the medications or the cumulative effect of one of the medications. So I asked to see his medication list. Person was on like 15 different medications. What? And so I asked for a medication reconciliation, fancy word, which means review the medicines, see which ones are duplicates of each other. And that happens because medicines go off patent, right? And when it goes off patent, it's available generically. And if it's available generically, that means that the price of it will drop significantly. And if that happens, then profits are less. And the establishment, Big Pharma, does not like fewer profits, less profits. They're profit driven, as a matter of fact. And so when you do, and you can also ask your pharmacist. Remember, your pharmacist has a doctorate, they call them PharmDs. They have a doctorate in pharmacology. They are very well versed in drugs and drug reactions, and they have tools and they have access to programs that will give you the information as to whether or not these are two medications doing the same thing, dueling banjos in your body. You have a right to know. And I also mentioned there's a website called drugs.com. Drugs.com. You can go there and you can plug in drug A and it'll say drug B. And you can ask, is there an interaction between these two drugs? But believe me, it gets more complex when instead of one drug being compared with one other drug, it's being compared with 4 or 5 or 6 or 10 other drugs. Then the possibility for the strange thing happens. Eliminate unnecessary drugs. Just spoke about that. Watch for drug-drug and drug supplement interactions. There is a belief that drugs are harmful and supplements are not. I am a living witness as a provider that that's not necessarily so. Supplements taken the wrong way, supplements taken in combinations that are not complementary, or supplements taken with drugs can have interactions and cause problems. Here's an example. If a woman has anemia or a person has anemia and they are given iron by the provider to help address the anemia, and then they take a calcium supplement or they eat food that is high in calcium, you will inactivate or create a situation where the iron cannot be absorbed, because iron can't be absorbed in a calcium-rich environment. So the provider would generally tell you, and the instructions on the bottle should tell you, that you take iron with something acidic, like orange juice, or you take it on an empty stomach, which can irritate your stomach lining. That's that's a side effect, a form of iatrogenesis. That some medications, if you take them on an empty stomach, will harm the lining of your stomach. So there's lots of ways that things that are seemingly innocent can cause you problems, and especially in older adults. There are two ends of the life spectrum where one must be especially careful. One is in the very young, and the other is in the, I hate to say very old, but let's just say older adults. And the older the adult, the more careful you need to be, because the systems are delicate. So you want to use things, something as simple as what we now call NSAIDs or ibuprofen or naproxen. These are agents that you take for pain. Or in the old days, it used to be bufferin or anacin. I'm dating myself, but it's relevant. Well, these things, aspirin derivatives, or the supplement analog, white willow bark, from which aspirin is derived, can irritate or actually destroy the stomach lining. So if you take them on an empty stomach, or if you take them indiscriminately, meaning, I know somebody who had a cold and a stuffy nose. So the person took a combination drug product, meaning something for the nose, decongestant, something for the sneezing, antihistamine, and something for headache, right? Now, I always discourage combination ingredients. Why? Because if you have a reaction, you don't know which one it was. B, you may need one and not need all the rest. So why put it in your body? So if you're having a sore throat, you don't take ibuprofen. That's not the right drug for that. If you're having a toothache, then you don't take you do need the pain reliever, which may be Tylenol or acetaminophen or ibuprofen, but you don't need an antihistamine and a decongestant. That's why I don't recommend combination products. Now, in an older person, that makes a difference, because some of those will cause an older person or a young person, or anybody for that matter, but especially the oldest, can get sleepy. And if seniors get sleepy, then they can slip and fall, or they fall asleep at the wheel, or they have decreased attentiveness while they're driving. All that can create problems caused by drugs, hereinafter referred to as iatrogenesis. Avoid overdiagnosis and over-testing. Order tests only when the results will change the management. In practice, let's look at the case of prostate cancer or any other cancer for that matter. If it has been diagnosed by, let's just say, CAT scan or some other kind of imaging faculty, and they say that person has stage 4 or stage 5 cancer, which means late stage, then ordering a biopsy, in my mind, is questionable. Why? Because if it won't change what you're going to do, in other words, would you treat stage 5 the same way, knowing where it originated from, or let's just take it a different step and say you wouldn't have chemotherapy, or you wouldn't have cancer, or you wouldn't have radiation therapy either way. Why have the test? Why put yourself under the risk of anesthesia, infection, or bleeding if you're not going to do anything different than you would do ordinarily, right? Recognize that incidental findings can lead to unnecessary procedures and anxiety. So sometimes we order tests and the finding, let's just say you have a colonoscopy and the person has a polyp, but the look of the polyp suggests that it's benign. Well, just even saying that you have a polyp can send people into a frenzy. Then it might be suggested, well, why don't you have a biopsy? Okay, that's one way to do it. And I'm not saying that it's right or it's wrong. But if that finding was noted, let's say, on a CAT scan or some other procedure that was not directly related to the person's complaint, it's something that was noted, you came in for X problem, and while doing the testing for that problem, you saw something else, but it does not directly affect the person's health. We would call that an incidental finding. It really doesn't change anything. It's just something we saw, and maybe we'll pay attention to it in the future, but it doesn't have any relevance to the person's present condition or present situation. And it really is not going to change what we're going to do. Well, that person then wants to know, God, please do everything, because, and it sends the person into a whole downward spiral of fear. And that will lead to other things. Here's another one. And I have a real personal feeling about this. There's a test that a person can have called lifeline screening. I happen to be a real proponent of lifeline screening. But in a book called Overdiagnosed, they said that lifeline screening, which does tests to see if your carotid, it's an ultrasound test to see if your arteries are open, your arteries going to your brain, your carotids, they do an ultrasound of them. Are they blocked? Are they open? If they are blocked, how much blockage is there? They also do screening for aortic aneurysm. They test for peripheral artery disease, a bunch of stuff. But the most important thing I wanted to point in bringing that up is that the carotid artery screening. In this book, Overdiagnosed, the author says that this is an unnecessary test. And I differ with that, because the author says that what that will then do is have the patient have surgery to clear the arteries. Now, there's other ways to do that. There's other ways to clear a person's arteries if they knew they were blocked. Do you want to wait until the person has a stroke before you tell them that they have blocked arteries, when if they did know in advance and you could show them, hey, and this is personal, because I found that out and I began a program to clear my arteries. And a year later, I went back, I had the same test, and the things were very different. Things had improved dramatically. Had I not done that test, I would not have known. So this is kind of the converse of what the establishment calls an unnecessary procedure. I say it's a very necessary procedure, and it's something that you should be screened for. Why? Because you have options at that point to do something about it that are not necessarily surgical options. They're nutritional options. Same thing with having a fasting insulin. I suggested that to somebody I was working with, and they said, if the person's obese, I already know that they have insulin resistance, so I don't have to order a fasting insulin test. And I took issue with that. I said, because if you knew how insulin resistant they are, and if you knew that changing that person's diet could bring down problems elsewhere, like in the arteries, like with restless leg syndrome, like with inflammation, which leads to other issues. It's not just about blood sugar. They'll do a test called the hemoglobin A1C and say, well, they have prediabetes. Fine, no argument there. But insulin resistance is a precursor to a lot of other diseases, which are not going to be reflected in the A1C, or it may tell you degree. So there's a lot of information you can get from that, but you won't get that information if you don't run the test, and most providers won't do that. Next, practice shared decision making. Discuss benefits, risks, alternatives, alternatives, and uncertainties with your provider. Hey, I heard a friend of mine had COPD, right? Chronic pulmonary obstructive disease, right? Now, the drug that was recommended was the latest drug, which is a patented drug, that was something like $500 or $600. Amazing. So I said, well, what about this other drug, which has been around for decades, treats the same condition, proven to be effective, but generically is maybe let's just say $100 if you go to a local pharmacy. And then I suggested, if the provider sends that prescription to an online pharmacy, like a Canadian pharmacy, that same drug, the one that's off patent, that's been around for decades, proven reliability, sometimes even made by the same pharmaceutical manufacturer, $50. $50. I get asthma medicine, been around for the longest time, manufactured by the same drug company. Get it from the online pharmacy, which is a Canadian pharmacy. 3 of them cost $58. One of them here in the lowest pharmacy you can think of will cost $180 something. I've even seen $200-$300. EpiPens, example, for people who have anaphylaxis, right? Immediate life-threatening reaction to a drug. EpiPens, $600, $800. Online pharmacy, 2 of them, $186. This is discussing alternatives. You don't have to just immediately take what is presented to you and not question it. And it's not done in a combative way. When I speak to my provider, I say, would you mind sending it to here, to this particular online pharmacy? Why? Because if you do it that way, it costs me a lot less money. And would you mind giving me refills? Because since it takes time to get here, you do it that way, it saves me money and time. Providers said, fine, not a problem. But you have to ask. And in order to ask, you have to know that there is an alternative, which is why I do these presentations. Ensure that you understand the potential harms as well as the potential benefits. I'd like to refer you to ChatGPT. or the other AIs. Familiarize yourselves with them. They're tremendous, tremendous utility when you ask the right questions. Because, example, you could compare two common pain relievers used for whatever you might use them for, over-the-counter ones, and it will tell you, this is why this one is good, this is why the other one is not. This is the long-term effects, the short-term effects, and by the way, would you like me to give you something else that might do the same job? I've been in practice. I've been a provider, shucks, coming on 50 years. There's no way, even if you take continuing education all the time, even if you're a bookworm like I am, the human brain selectively prunes information that you don't use. So yeah, all providers, we have books that we go to look up stuff, but there's no way you can keep all of that in your head, and especially do it in the 15 minutes you have to see the patient. So you look up stuff before you go, and respectfully, non-combatively, you interface with, and you synchronize, that word came up, you synchronize with your provider and say, if I do this, what happens? If I do what you suggest, what happens? Make sure you understand, especially when you go to sign a consent. Very important when it comes to vaccinations. Think about what we just went through. Many people were given a waiver. They didn't, and it's a consent, but it's really a waiver if you read it. And what it says is, when I accept this injection, I agree to hold the manufacturer, the transporters, the provider, the person who gives me this injection. I waive all right to sue them if I have a bad outcome. Would you sign it if you really understood that? Especially if you understood that X number of people who took this injection got 5, 6, 7 different side effects. Would you do it if you knew? But if you don't know, you can't ask. So a lot of people, and they'll take the advice of the person who's presenting it to them and say, just go ahead and sign this. It's just a consent, it's routine. Pay attention. Align the treatment plans with your goals and your values. If your values say, I want human insulin, which most people will take, but not, let me make it more generic. Medications which come from animals versus synthetics. This is what you see with thyroid medication. I, because of my religious practice, want a medication that doesn't have pork in it. Or, as came up recently, again, with injections, vaccinations, some of these products are formulated with aborted fetal tissue. You won't know this unless you read the insert or unless you look it up. It's not generally presented to you. But does that align with your values? Does that align with your practices? Does that align with what you understand is the best practice of your deen? Whether it's your Christian deen or your Muslim deen or your Hindu deen or whatever your particular religious life, cultural practices are, does what the Jehovah's Witnesses are another ones. They won't take transfusions. So if you're going to give them something that's blood products, they have a right to know. So whether or not that aligns with their values. Focus, now this is, if you get nothing else from what I've been speaking with you about all along, this is the key here. Rather than treating symptoms, focus on the root cause. Remember, Give the environment what it needs, give the organism what it needs, it thrives. Deprive it of that, it sickens, adapts, or dies. So when you have an illness, you should think, what is my body, my master organism, my brilliant body, designed by an immensely, indescribably elegant creator? What circumstances, nutrition, care have I deviated from? What my fitra have I deviated from that is giving me this illness? Am I getting enough sleep? There are people who have chronic pain. If you don't get relief of your pain, you cannot sleep well. If you don't sleep well, that's a setup for a whole bunch of other downstream problems. So address that. Speak with your provider and say, is there a way that I could take X medication, whatever it is, whether you suggest it or your provider suggests it, so that I could get a good night's sleep? Is one thing that we're doing that's kind of fun. I got something, and it's because I'm a nerd. It's called a frequency resonance generator. A frequency resonance generator. What is that? It's a piece of equipment, very small, very innocuous, that generates sine waves. And Tesla, Dr. Robert Royal Rife, they did experiments, well tested, well documented, that say that even the Earth has a frequency. We talk about this a lot in Lunetics, frequency. And it's well documented in Dr. Rife's teachings, experiments, and his work, that bacteria vibrate at a certain frequency. The human cell vibrates at a certain frequency. Healthy human cells vibrate at a certain frequency. Sick human cells vibrate at a certain frequency. Change the frequency, you change the behavior of the organism. So there's a frequency that is best for sleep. So we decided to try it. And it says that the Earth has a pulse. So you can set the sine wave to generate that frequency. Boy, can you sleep good? Oh my goodness, you just set it up next to your bed. The zone of it goes out about 16 feet, so it doesn't have to be right up on you, and you won't hear it. You just feel it, and you won't even really feel it. All you know is that, gee, I fall asleep a lot easier now than I did. And so I'm experimenting with it for pain relief. Yeah, and you'd be amazed. So just look at that. The Schumann frequency generator, resonance generator, just a nice toy. Doesn't cost much. Improve nutrition. Remember, it's part of your fitra. Some people do really well with beef. Some people do really well with chicken. Some people do really well with no meat at all. What is your fitra? But there's certain things, and I'm going to repeat this at the risk of being redundant. There are certain principles that we can all, irrespective of your perspective, agree on. Highly processed food is bad for you. Eat a lot of it and you will get sick. Highly processed food is not your fitra. Highly sugared foods, large amounts of sugar, will make you ill. That is not the human fitra. Get your sugars from your fruit, not from things that we love, but that is not your fitra. Do not eat foods that have been fried at high temperatures. That is not good for you because it changes the chemical composition of the oil. So improve your nutrition. Get your vitamins, get your minerals, get your amino acids, get your fatty acids. You hear me spoke about that last time. Your brain has to have fatty acids. Your body has to have cholesterol. Your hormones, your cell integrity, they all depend on cholesterol. Excessive amounts, bad for you. Too low, bad for you. Kinds of cholesterol. I've done presentations on this before. Go back and listen to them. Increase your physical activity. This is a tough one. For people who are sedentary, who have pain, or people whose work requires them to sit for periods of time, we must set a timer. And I'm working on this one hard. You set a timer so that at least once an hour you get up and you stretch. Or you're sitting at your desk. You can get one of those things that you have under your desk. It's like a bicycle pedal thing. And you do this while it's under your desk. Nobody will know. You can get a standing desk. Lots of ways to do it. But even if you don't do any of that and you sit all day, you get off work, get up and walk. Helps control cravings, helps increase insulin sensitivity. There's no downside to it. Find a physical activity that you love. Find something that you love. Mine is dancing. I love to dance. So put your tunes on. Get your groove on. Dance. Oh, astaghfirullah. I can just hear all the purists of the Islam saying, dancing, that's haram. Well, if that's what you believe, then don't. Me, I dance. Manage stress. Oh boy, that's a big one. That's what stress, physical stress, financial stress, emotional stress, food stress. What are these things? These are pressures, whether they're direct, as in pressing physically on something, or whether they are imagined by our consistent thoughts. Stress, you must manage it. You must not allow your thoughts to run away with you. You must not allow your mind to play tricks on you. You must stay right here in the now. I mentioned a movie. If you get a chance to do it, go see it. It's on one of the streaming channels. It's called Jumper. And in Jumper, a person has a gift he's not aware of. And without warning, at least in the beginning of the movie, he thinks a certain thing and finds himself actually in that environment. So he's transported and he gets his, how did I end up here? I was just here and I thought X, I thought about something and all of a sudden I'm there. I thought about being with someone and all of a sudden I'm transported there. A lot of analogies there. Because one of the ways mental stress manifests itself is you imagine something that's happening in the future, hasn't occurred yet, but you can place your focus there and do it so vividly and so intensely that what you're imagining for all intents and purposes is actually happening. We know this because we can hook you up. You could take your own pulse and just imagine yourself going into a meeting, which you're going to have tomorrow. You're not there yet. And imagine it going badly and your pulse will go up, your blood pressure will go up, your cortisol levels will go up, a whole bunch of stuff. Your pupils will dilate. All kinds of stuff will happen. And it hasn't happened. Right? Guilt, depression, all the blaming, all those things happen, events in the past. And it can happen just with a trigger. It can happen with songs. Yeah. So just pay attention to where your focus goes, where your attention goes. Wherever your attention goes, your energy flows. And if it's a good place, like Brother William was saying, then you're going to enhance your life. If it's a painful place, then you're going to experience negative stress. There is such a thing as positive stress. That's how bones get stronger. You exercise them and the bone responds to that increased demand upon it, and your muscles get stronger and your bones get stronger. As long as you don't take it to excess, it's healthy for you. This is a big one. correct metabolic dysfunction, such as insulin resistance. My people, my good people, understand that if you do nothing else except look at insulin resistance and study insulin resistance and make sure you get the tests for insulin resistance, recognize the symptoms of insulin resistance. If you did nothing else, you could prevent several of the 10 leading causes of death and most of the preventable causes of death. So as Brother William was talking about, do I want to live? How do I want to live? Deal with the insulin resistance, and you know that your life is going to be better. I cannot think of I'm striving right now to think of one system in your body that will not be positively affected by decreasing or eliminating insulin resistance. Certainly not your brain. 100%. Get your brain right. Big move towards that direction. Get rid of the insulin resistance. That's not the same thing as diabetes. Diabetes is the end result in type 2 diabetes, Alzheimer's, type 3 diabetes, insulin resistance, and diabetes. These are the results of unchecked insulin resistance. Insulin resistance shows up 10 to 20 years before diabetes or glucose abnormalities do. Get it checked. And strengthen social connections. I think this is where one of the things Brother William was talking about, get involved, get engaged with the youth. If you don't want to get involved and get engaged with the youth, find somebody that you can speak with, interact with, because being alone and being isolated can drive a person crazy. I know that's not a nice term, but yeah, can cause a person to imagine things, to really lose contact with reality. Did I make that up? No. One of the worst punishments for offenders in prison is solitary confinement. Person does something in jail that needs a punishment or a reaction greater than just being imprisoned, is to be imprisoned alone. Yeah. So strengthen your social connections. And lastly, do apply the principle of primum non nocere. First, do no harm. This is I have fruit gnats around me, excuse me. I'm not conducting an orchestra. I got gnats. This goes all the way back to Hippocrates. First, do no harm. If you cannot do any good, first do no harm. So when we're thinking of a procedure, we're thinking of a prescription, we're thinking of an invention, the first thing you have to ask is it necessary? Do you really need to have a pap smear at age 80? Especially when we know that most abnormalities in the female reproductive system are caused by or have their origin in sexual activity, whether it's sexually transmitted diseases, and recently the human papillomavirus. The person hasn't had sex. We know from demographics, nuns rarely get cervical cancer. Why? Because those that are truly abstinent, underline truly, it's a sexually transmitted, thought to be a sexually transmitted thing. So why is it necessary? That's a good point. And is there a safer alternative? This bothers me a great deal with certain injections that they want to give to younger and younger and younger children. They want to give young children a certain injection that is supposed to protect them against the HPV virus, which is believed to cause cancers, cervical cancers. And you could ask the question, is there a safer alternative? Well, number one, use protection if you have sex. There's a big one. We look at our dean, and the dean says that you should be abstinent before marriage. Now, many of the scriptures say that, specifically Christianity and the Quran? I know those two for a fact. Why do they tell us to do that? Are they trying just to step on all of our fun? Well, there's a practical reason for that. And the practical reason for that is every human being has its own biome. You cannot see it by grace of the Creator, but we are covered in germs, bacteria. They're all on our skin, they're on our body, they're in our body fluids, they're everywhere we are. As a matter of fact, it's said that only 5% of the DNA in the human being is human DNA. The rest are the things that digest us, digest our food for us, that colonize us, but are kept at such a low level that they do not do us harm. Well, every time you connect with somebody, handshake, touch something that they touched, put something in your mouth that they had in their mouth, or more significantly, put a part of their body into your body and exchange body fluids, well, now you're getting a nice healthy dose of whatever they have, beneficial or harmful. So what's the safer alternative? Limit the number of contacts. That's why most of the religions say abstinence before marriage. But now the narrative, and has been for many years, especially when I was a teen and a young adult in the 60s, free love. Come fondle my love beads. Let's smoke something and let's swing an episode. Look at the image that they put in front of the young females now. You walk around with your body half out. You're judged by how much of your body you show. You're judged. You gear your appearance so that the thing that people should notice most about you is how sexy you are, based on the clothes you have, how long your eyelashes are, how long your nails are, the false weave that you have in your hair, versus what kind of person are you. Judge a lot of that by how a person walks. What's the expression on their face? What's their vibration? What frequency are they sending out? Huh? Certainly safer alternatives than getting involved with somebody, having a one-night stand, and then going home with a lot more than you bargained for. Safer alternatives. Abortion, for an example. What's the safer alternative? There's a common narrative now to really downplay motherhood, that motherhood is some kind of a curse or some kind of a serious imposition upon your freedom as a female. So rather than kill something, how about you just don't make it in the first place? You look at the demise of the family, and it's not just the quote unquote Black families, but it's the demise of families in general. We were talking about, by the way, names of calling things. I don't like calling myself Black. I'm not, as you can look at me. My mother would tell you I'm high yellow. I much prefer to describe myself in terms of my nationality, which is what everybody else does, or my personality. I'm a talkative female. I'm an energetic person. Makes a lot more sense, right? These are all alternatives, right? So safer alternatives do no harm to yourself and certainly do no harm to anybody else. Will this improve outcomes meaningful to my situation? And this is where I'm going to make a concerted and a plea, actually. There are certain tests which I think are extremely meaningful to your situation. One of them is testing for insulin resistance. The second one is testing your brain. How are you feeding your brain? Does your brain have everything that it needs to function properly? I heard somebody speak about a senior and how that senior was forgetful, how that senior seemed to be really a drag to be around because person couldn't remember things, couldn't seem to simple tasks like operating a computer or operating a smartphone seem to be beyond that person's grasp. And my first thought was, well, have you tested the person's brain to see whether or not they have that capacity before you judge them as being lazy? They may not be lazy because they don't do certain things. They may not be forgetful because they're deliberately being obstinate, stiff-necked, and rebellious. It's because they don't have the functional capacity to do that. Cognition is impaired. But the beautiful point that I want to drive home now, it doesn't have to be that way. There is a way to assess your brain and to remedy deficiencies that affect your ability to think properly and to function properly. I'm a representative of it. Ben and I will be sending our tests in tomorrow. It's called Brain Span. It has certain metrics. Are you becoming insulin resistant? Well, we can measure that in terms of your level of palmitic acid. You're becoming forgetful. Well, we do tests on speed, processing speed. It's a test you take on your computer or your phone. Processing speed, cognition, memory. Do you have all the things that your body needs in terms of your brain function for, it's called essential fatty acids. Your brain is mostly fat. Despite the bad things that have been said about fat, you don't have fat, your brain doesn't function right. What kinds of fat? Well, we can test. So I want you to keep that in mind. And if you need more information about that or anything else that I've said, you can contact me. truehumanhealing@gmail.com, truehumanhealing@gmail.com, and my phone number. That number is area code 516-209-6069. Please make a note of it. With that said, I'm handing over the talking stick to Instructor. I think it's Sister Nawa now, right? I'm stopping the share, and if there are questions, I'm happy to entertain them. And if not, I'm going to now make a meal for Instructor Bilal.
Alhamdulillah, thank you so much for your presentation.
All right.
All right.
Thank you.
That's talking stick over, no problem. To Instructor Bilal, who teaches us from going from being human doings to human beings. And now he's going to teach us if we're living, we're just surviving.
Okay, so thank you once again for joining us on this Sunday, June 7th, 2026. I am your international instructor, Benjamin Bilal, and we're going to be dealing with a topic today entitled, Are You Living or Just Surviving? So we're going to be doing some comparative analysis in terms of how we are living this life or whether or not we are living, in fact, or just merely surviving. So stand by for the information. Most of you have seen this picture already of the triune brain. This is a description of the brain that was postulated by, what is his name? Dr. Paul MacLean. You can look him up, McClean, Paul MacLean. And it's the triune brain. It's letting you know that you have basically three parts of the brain. There are not only three parts, but these are the major sections of the brain. The one on top is called the forebrain. It's also called the neocortex brain. And it regulates the intelligence. And we know that intelligence is responsible for everything that you do, everything that your body does, consciousness itself. So it deals mostly with reason, your ability to be reasonable and rational It deals with self-awareness, which is unique pretty much to the human kingdom, as opposed to just the animal kingdom. I've seen cats walk by a mirror and jump at their own image because they don't know what that is. We see other creatures, you might hold them up to a mirror and they look at it, but they don't know that that's them because they're not self-aware. Humans have been created by the grace of Allah to be self-aware. And we're also able to plan, which means that we can calculate the things going into the future. We're living in the now, but we are still able to prepare for the future. And that's a feature of this forebrain. This brain in front is what we're talking about. Directly beneath this brain is what is called the limbic brain, or the limbic part of the brain, and it's controlling the emotions and the imagination, the dreams, the rewards that you expect in the future. It's dealing with issues of pleasure and pain. That's all happening in this midbrain. Those things are not necessarily occurring in the top brain, called the neocortex, but it is absolutely happening in the midbrain. Then we have, lurking beneath that brain, what is called the cerebellum, or the reptilian brain, which is controlling your basic instincts. And what are your basic instincts? They are the instincts that help you to survive. They control your breathing. So, for instance, when I give you these lessons, I want you to hearken back to what you read in the Quran concerning these words when you've heard them before. And we all know that when we're reading about the creation of the Khalifa in the Quran, it says that when I have breathed into him of my ruh. So what does that tell you? It tells you that your ruh is a part of your survival mechanism. That breath that we're talking about, it's not just breathing, it's a part of how you survive as a human species. It deals with what is called the fight and flight mode. It's dealing with your involuntary, or what is called your reflexive mode or manner. Means that you don't have to consciously decide to do it. It's going to kick in when certain circumstances are present because it is involuntary. And why are those things in you in the first place? Because the human being very often doesn't have time to think about whether they should do this thing or not. You don't have time to think about whether you should continue breathing. So Allah lets that happen automatically. He lets that happen involuntarily. You can set it off. You can say, I'm going to stop breathing, and you might get away with 30 seconds, maybe a minute if you're good at it. But eventually it's going to return to the default setting. And the default setting is that Allah wants you to continue breathing because he wants you to continue living. But if you're not surviving, that's the first floor, that's the foundational level of living. If you can't make it to survival, there's no way in the world you're going to reach living. So people who think that they're living the good life because they're out drinking and smoking and partying and fornicating and all of these other things, they don't realize that they're actually interrupting the very thing that is helping them to survive. And there's no way they're going to be able to stick around long enough to thrive if their basic living accommodations are not being met. They're merely surviving. The human being is a specially designed creature. The human being is not an ordinary being. He and she are specially designed, created, and programmed. But our unique feature is that we are programmed with a level of autonomy, what many of us call freedom, given to no other creature on this earth. We are not only able to think, we are able to think about how we think. And I want you to think about that. We have been granted three basic levels of brain power, just discussed. The neocortex, responsible for the thinking and the reasoning. The limbic, responsible for our emotion and memory. And reptilian, responsible for survival, fight, and or flight. Survival represents the idea of that which is beneath. That's what that prefix "sur" represents in this case. SUR, beneath the whatever they're calling vibe. It's not an actual word, but it's connected to many words that have to do with the life principle. It's in the word of vivid. It's in the word of vibrant. It's in the word of vitality, vivaciousness. All of those things represent that which is living. So if all of these words are connected to survival, how are they connected, or on what level are they connected? They operate beneath the surface of your very life, your life force, your ability to breathe and live and grow and prosper and make progress. So all of those things are built upon a particular foundation. The foundation is survival. So you have to survive in order to reach these other wonderful accommodations. So survival is the platform upon which true life is to be established. So if you want to have true life, if you want to be considered living, then you have to pay attention to the foundation which makes that possible. The English letter V, as in victory, itself is feminine and represents the valley which the male sows his seed down into. If you look at the shape of the V here, you can see that it's a valley that one has to go down into. Down into. That's what makes this letter feminine. Words such as vagina, virgin, vulva, and even vibration, amongst others, give further indication as to the importance of the feminine principle. Other feminine letters are F and M. At some point in the near future, we'll go over the entire 26-letter English alphabet, and I will differentiate for you which ones are masculine and which ones are feminine. And a lot of the words that you already know will make plenty more sense. In fact, there is a V hiding in plain sight right in the center of the letter M. You see right here in the middle. And that's because M is also a feminine letter. We use it for the word mother, for God's sake. Yes, ma'am. Yeah. So when you start to think about how these letters are used, it'll be much more quickly that you are able to determine whether they are indeed masculine or feminine. And this is true not only for the English language, it is also true for the Arabic alphabet. Surah Al-Fatiha, you see the F there? Al-Fatiha is translated as the opening, and all openings are feminine. As human beings, we should be focusing on maintaining the fundamental, another F word, and the foundational, another F word, life, the foundational life of our human structure. The foundational life of our human structure is based upon the feminine principle. If there's no feminine principle, there is no life to speak of. Survival is a feminine word, which means that which is responsible for giving birth to other things. It's not the sur part, that's the prefix. That means beneath the surface of a thing, beneath the surface of that which is vivid, that which is vivaciousness, life, living. And survival, again, is a feminine word, which means that it is responsible for giving birth to other things. In the movie, The Matrix, which should let you know that whatever the Matrix is, it's a feminine principle. The Matrix, the character Neo was seen throughout the entire film having to make important decisions, important choices. In order to make these choices, he had to have a developed sense of reasoning. If you're going to make choices, you have to have a very developed sense of what you should do versus what you should not do. The esoteric meaning, that means the secret meaning, the meaning that's not put out into the public, that would be exoteric. We're talking about esoteric, which means hidden or secret meaning. For the word reason means son of the ray, R-E-A, which is actually the R-A-Y. So when we talk about our ability to reason, to be rational, we're talking about the product of the ray. And we all know that ray represents light. And in this case, we're talking about light coming from the intellect. The sun represents rational application and distribution of the light. Matrix means ma-trix or tricking ma. Ma is also Mother Nature. Artificial living represents the living of a false life. The word trick is also a slang word for prostitute. Although the scriptural schemers couldn't say this directly about the Virgin Mary, they ascribed it to a secondary Mary named Magdalene. Magdalene is symbolic of the brain's amygdala. The amygdala, sometimes referred to as Magdala, is an almond-shaped structure in the temporal lobe that plays a central role in emotion, memory, and survival-related behaviors. So we're taking the symbol off of the Bible page right now, and we're relating it to the social sciences, to the biological sciences, to other very important ideas that are taking place in the total life of the human being, not just the scriptural or religious life. The amygdala is a primary component of the limbic system, which is the brain's network responsible for processing emotions, memories, and basic drives. Located in the temporal lobe, it specifically manages emotional responses like fear, anxiety, and anger while driving the body's fight or flight reactions. So obviously the amygdala is responding to and affected by both the limbic brain as well as the reptilian brain, which handles fight or flight situations. The amygdala is located right here, and it's affecting both of these situations in the limbic brain, as well as affecting what happens in the substrata brain, called the reptilian brain. The social schemers seek to keep as many people as possible stuck in the reptilian brain mode. They do this by manufacturing emergencies for the brain to give its attention to as often as possible. When the brain is in emergency mode, it has to switch off the channels leading to reasoning and to true emotion when they deem it necessary. By true emotion, we're talking about that which represents a response to something, whereas false emotion denotes a reaction to something. Now, you may not automatically know what the difference is. That's your homework. Look up those two words and come back and tell us what the differences are. Response, that's what it should be as emotion. Reaction, which is where most people are who utilize emotion to speak to a situation or to call themselves addressing a situation. Most of what we do as human doings is from a reaction point of view, not a response has an answer, a thought out answer. Here's how I'm going to respond. I've thought about this. So it's being fed from the higher brain, the reasoning brain. And then I respond. So I'm still feeling things. I'm still emotional about it, but I'm not going to do anything to be reckless. Whereas if I'm just reacting, then I'm just calling and responding. Whatever the call is, I'm just responding. Not even responding, really. As I said, reacting is the more proper word. In the Bible, Adam, which I want you to see now as the neocortex reasoning brain on top, that's Adam, is put into a deep sleep. And the serpent, which I want you to see for our purposes as the reptile brain, the reptilian brain, sees it as the perfect opportunity to convince Eve, who I want you to see for our purposes as the limbic emotional / memory brain. The serpent wanted to convince Eve to disobey God. If the social schemers can convince us to live in our emotions and memory, they can rule us forever. I want you to hear this carefully. Adam, the top brain, is put into a deep sleep. It becomes inactive. When that happens, the next brain in charge, being the emotional brain, the limbic brain, begins to perform, step up to the task. However, the brain beneath that, the reptilian brain, which is purely instinctive, it begins to make suggestions to the emotional brain, the limbic brain. This only happens when you lose your ability to reason, when you disobey the urge in the intellect to be reasonable, to think this thing through, to take the time to walk through the details of this thing, to see if this is good for us or not, if this is going to aid our survival, if this is going to aid our emotional development, if it's going to aid our ability to develop reasoning ability. But when that dies or when that becomes asleep, as the Bible says, into a deep, see, the Quran doesn't say that about Adam, that Allah put him into a deep sleep. And that's an important correction in scripture. That the creator of all, the source creator, did not put us in a situation where our reasoning ability would be nullified and made void. The Quran simply says that Adam slipped, meaning that this was a mistaken situation for Adam. And it says that he thereafter repented. Repent. Do again, pent, 5. He regained his 5 senses because the going to sleep in the previous scripture was a matter of dulling or putting to sleep his 5 senses. So he had to get those 5 senses acting again. He had to repent, pentagram, 5. And that's how he was able to go on. And it says Allah forgave him and he went on back about his business and continued in his work. Isn't that wonderful? So these are some of the corrections that the Quran is making on previous scriptures. So if the social schemers can convince us to live in our emotions and in our memory, I remember when, like the children of Israel were doing, the Hebrews were doing that. I remember when we had lentils and garlic. You know, when we were with Pharaoh, we had all, we at least had a cuisine to work with. This guy is just giving us this mundane food. We had steak and potatoes when we went Pharaoh. This guy here is just giving us access to regular stuff. And I believe the regular stuff was the garlic and the lentils or whatever, whichever way it goes. I'm sure you'll read it and become more versed with it. Okay. But the point is that they were in their memory. And if we get into our memory, then the social schemers can rule us forever. All they have to do is never let us forget the evil perpetrated upon us. And I'm talking specifically now about the social schemers who have been in charge of the African American experience for the last 400 or 500 years. The scheme there has been to inundate us with the memory of where we came from, what people did to us, how people are not allowing us any breathing room, and how this has been happening for 400 straight years with no let up. And therefore, there's no way we can move forward. Everything that's done to us is because of something that happened in our past. In the past, in order to even explain it to anybody, you have to go into the memory brain. So all they have to do is just keep reminding us of that. They remind us, they give us another mind after the mind they just gave us, but they never allow us to live in the now. Yeah, I understand all of that happened yesterday, but what's happening now is the question of the day. All they have to do is never let us forget. You know how the Jewish people have that famous saying, we will never forget? Never let us forget the evil perpetrated upon us. What they won't let us remember are the things that the Jews and others refuse to forget. And that is along with whatever may have happened in the days of their Pharaoh and the evil he perpetrated on them. They also remind their people of the great things in their legacy, the great minds that they have among their people, the great authors and scholars that they have situated in their history. That's the part we leave out. All of the great people we mentioned from our legacy are people who were dealing with the issue of enslavement and the way we were prosecuted and prostituted, and actually, and mistreated, mishandled. So what they won't let us remember are those great things in our legacy. The great things are our human contribution to humanity. If they do not allow you to remember that, they are not allowing you to breathe as a people, as a functional people. They're not allowing you to live. They're merely allowing you to survive. That's it. Because we need you here. We need your body here. We need the work that you're able to do. We need all of that. We need your jokes in the comic clubs and the Richard Pryors and all of these people. We need all that. So let's just let them breathe on that level. Let them survive. But that's not living, because if you were to try to initiate some of the advice that these comedians are giving you in our day and time, you'd be dipped. The comedians themselves are out of here. Richard Pryor, Bill Cosby, and they're already out of here because they didn't come here with a program to help you live. That's what the prophets were missioned to do. That's the advice that was given by inspired people on this planet, but not just to survive by any means necessary. Does that sound familiar? So if we're not doing that, then those great moments in our history that represent our human contribution to humanity get erased. We must be convinced that there is always a clear and present danger ready to destroy us at any second. You see, when an animal is being threatened, let's say a deer who's out grazing is being threatened by a lioness who's hunting them. When the deer comes in contact, or eye contact at least, or ear contact with that lioness, the deer is then on the defensive. The deer goes into fight or flight mode. I'm going to fight this creature because I believe I can beat him, or I'm going to flee because I already know that this is too much for me. Those teeth he has or she has are just too big for the teeth and the paws and whatever else it is that I have to fight with. So I'm going to run. I'm going to flee. The third option is that I'm going to pause. I'm just going to stand still and hope that he doesn't see me. All of those things can lead to the death of that particular creature who's being hunted. So this creates an artificial fear in our nervous system, which prevents us from growing because the blood, which I have translated as the social instincts, is always being shunted towards the extremities and not towards safety and security. This is also how extremist ideologies are born. I want you to hear me clearly on this. Information that's coming into the five basic senses first make their appearance in your nervous system. Registering along the spinal column. That's where information first appears. And based on that impact, you decide whether this is a dangerous situation, an emergency situation at which you're now going to have to make a quick, fast, instinctive decision, not even a thought out decision. It bypasses reason. You don't have time to think about what the reason would be for me to run from this gorilla. No, it's an automatic, instinctive move that needs to be made. And when that happens, Allah has designed the body to take the blood flow, which is occurring on the most part in the gut area, to digest food and rest the body. Rest and digest. That's your default system. But when an emergency occurs, then the blood has to do something a bit different. It has to shunt itself towards where the issues are, so that if I have to fight, I have to have the right amount of power in my fist. Or if I have to flee, I also have to have the right amount of power in my feet and in my legs. So those are the areas of the body that become the favored areas for blood to concentrate itself in until we are once again safe. But if you're being taught a doctrine that says that I'm never safe in America, I'm, I'm never safe in this neighborhood I live in. I'm never safe amongst these politicians and these preachers and these teachers. I have no outlet that represents safety and security. But when you're in that state, you're in a state of perpetual emergency, which is actually and factually impossible for any creature. Allah didn't create a creature like that who is always in emergency mode, who is always in danger, Will Robinson. They're always in that. No, he didn't create a creature like that. In the animal world, again, when they get confronted with an emergency, danger situation, they get the necessary blood to go to those parts of the body that are able to take them out and away from the emergency. Once they're away from the emergency and they learn to breathe normally again, then guess what happens? Their life returns to the default setting, which they see as safety and security. Survival, the bottom level of energy that all living creatures possess. But if they can artificially keep that instigation going on in your system, then they are creating an artificial extreme that never or very rarely turns off or tunes down. And this is also how extremist ideologies are born. We've had many of these extremist ideologies amongst our people here in America. There are many of these extremist ideologies that are created in countries outside of America, in places in Africa, in Asia, in Australia, in many places. There are extremist ideologies. I'm not saying that you should just be there and just deal with whatever the issues are and not worry about danger. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that while you are ridding yourself of the danger and the emergency, you should also, with your rational brain, be concocting a plan to get permanently out of that danger. Instead, we've been doing the diametric opposite of that, creating more dangerous situations: drugs, alcohol, fighting, violence, wife abuse, children abuse, husband abuse. The crimes that we have been committing have been surmounting year after year, decade after decade, century after century, because of the mismanagement of what is happening in the intellect. The intellect has become corrupted. I'm talking about our situation here in America as people. It has become corrupted. It's the same as if your blood becomes tainted. Keep that in mind. The survival mind is a part of the brain regulated by the R complex, or the reptilian brain. That's another name for the reptilian brain, the R complex. The reptilian brain, or the R complex, is an evolutionary model of the brain, proposing that the deepest, most ancient part of the human brain controls vital survival functions, instincts, and automatic behaviors. So this is not behavior that you have to put some thought into whether you're going to enact it or not. It's something that your brain automatically kicks into to save your life. That's what we mean by survival. All of us have heard the nursery rhyme, Mary Had a Little Lamb. They say its fleece was white as snow. And everywhere that Mary went, her lamb was sure to go. It followed her to school one day. It was against the rules. It made the children laugh and play to see a lamb at school. Now, whether you realize it or not, and I can't prove it factually that this is what this particular rhyme is explaining, but I do know that many of these people who ended up being famous poets and famous philosophers and storytellers, they inculcated these kinds of symbolic, deep rooted messages into their work, into their academic work. So I'm believing that Mary, being that it's such a popular name in religion, it has something to do with religion. And we know that Jesus is called the Lamb without spot or blemish in the Bible. Together, I believe they represent the limbic brain. Limbic, limbic brain. They are given to us as an emotional package in order to make us emotionally vulnerable. Extreme emotion can shut off the channel to reasoning and being able to plan your life. If they can keep your life in emotional overdrive, it will then be impossible for you to access the chambers that are creating the ability to reason and be rational and be decision makers. All of that goes out the window if they can just keep you in extreme emotion. The banger, the criminal life. He's always looking out to see if another criminal is going to take his stuff, if another guy is going to take his woman. He's always looking out. So he can't plan, is the point. Life and love are related words. You already know that the letters F and V are interchangeable. The vowels are inconsequential. Life and love are related words. If you are not living, it is impossible for you to be loving. We have had the incorrect meaning for love planted into our psyche and have been taught to believe that love is passion. Love is not passion. Love is intelligence. We love the things that account for our survival and our ability to thrive, and it takes thinking for that to happen. So it takes thinking for us to be in the mode of the truly living. The Bible and the Quran speak about the favored people being of the living. And if they're of the living, it's because they learn what love is truly about. It's not about the sex organs. It's not about the pimple, the bumps you get in your skin when you see that favorite girl or guy. That's platform stuff. That's foundational stuff leading to love. But it is not actual love. Intelligent living is love. This also becomes the basis for our family and community life. Is your family life based on just passion? Based on sexual interest in somebody? No. You love your family passionately, but you know that passion is not talking about a physical attraction. It's talking about an intellectual attraction. The protection for these levels of life is built into our social engagement. Our bodies, our emotions, and our intellects are connected to create what Imam W.D. Muhammad once called a group soul. There's the human soul that all human beings share and share alike. But amongst the different ethnic groups on this planet, because of their proximity to each other, because they are born basically in the same areas of the world, they grow up in the same basic environment as other people who look like them. They pretty much eat the same foods that people in that environment eat. They wear the same clothing, they love the same colors, all of that kind of stuff. And when they do it in the same way that other people's in that particular group do it, then they end up being called group souls, the group soul. And they end up being called tribes. That's essentially what a tribe is. They share these common characteristics. And the group soul establishes the protection for the communal life. That's why tribes protect each other. They have so much in common that they can't afford not to protect each other. The more we get to know ourselves and our immediate environment, the greater our protection against harm should be. The esoteric meaning for the word social is the soul's shell. And by shell, we mean that which they use as protection, outer protection that other creatures cannot easily penetrate. Now, what creatures on this planet have that kind of exterior? It's mostly those creatures that are deemed to be reptiles. So your social nature is a part of your reptilian makeup. For the human being contains all creatures. Well, the part that is busy protecting itself against other foreign invaders, that's your reptilian. When other people come in and pounce on it or bite at it or whatever, we saw an alligator who couldn't do anything with a turtle because of the turtle's protective shell. He would just put that turtle in his mouth. He'd turn it upside down. He kept cramping down with all of the pressure that this alligator has in his mouth. He could not crack that shell of protection. So the alligator had to eventually let him loose and let it go about its business. So social is the soul's shell. And therefore, the social life operates on the same premise as the reptilian brain, as stated. It is also fight, flight, or freeze. When that alligator had that turtle could do nothing but stay still. Push his head and his extremities, his arms and legs, and his tail back up under the shell and just stay still and wait it out. Those are important notes for the development of your social life. The root letters for shaitan, in my conclusion, are given to us as Shin, Tal, Nun, or SHTN. Those are the root letters that the scholars, quote unquote, give us for the word shaitan, but that is a fabrication. The word shaitan follows the exact same rule as other Arabic words with the same construction. Let us look at a few of them. Rahman, Ramadan, Insan, Shaban. All of these are following the same rule for the endings of words. The ending AAN or an, as in Rahman and Ramadan and Insan and Shaban, etc., that AAN sound indicates that which is extreme and pervasive. So that means if it's attached to the word Rahman, then whatever Rahman is signifying, that power, that influence, that force is extreme and pervasive. Even if you think it's mercy, it means that this mercy is extreme. It's not ordinary. This group of people called Insan, they're experiencing something in their life construction that is not ordinary. It's something to pay attention to because it's extreme. And it's everywhere. That's pervasive. It's everywhere. The mercy that you think is Rahman, that's everywhere. The scholars also switched the meaning of nisa to mean women. That word does not mean women. A plural word with no singular meaning attached. You mean to tell me you can be nisa, but not by yourself? You can only refer to that species, that gender as nisa when you're talking about them as a group, a group of women. But what's the word for one of them? There is no word for one of them. They substituted the meaning of a thing with no support. That's what the word originally meant and means in the Quran, nisa. It means a thing or a person or a group with no support, not an individual necessarily. It's going to be a group of people fitting this description. But the Persian word nisyan is what they substituted nisa for. So nisa came to mean what the Persian word nisyan means, which is a thing forgotten. It also has to do with illness or being diseased. If anyone has their phone open, please mute it. Thank you. So when you go to your so-called scholars and they tell you that nisa means to forget a thing, one who forgets often, that sounds clinical to me, doesn't it? Yeah, they say this is what the word for woman is. You got to always remind her because she's always forgetting. No, that's not what the word is referring to. And there's much more to say on that word that will be said in the up and coming weeks or days. Boy, both of those words are hard for me to use now. The up and coming sessions. How about that? Huh. Yeah. But it literally means those who do not have support. Why is that? Because the opposite word of nisa'a is rijalun, rijalun, and they translate that as the men or the males. Rijalun qawamuna ala nisa, that the men are the maintainers, the providers, and the supporters over the women, or for the women. They also translate it. Well, who are they? They obviously the masculine species, aren't they, Instructor Bilal? No. You can be a male and be rijal. You can also be a female and be rijal. You can be a male and be nisa. And you can be a female and be nisa. Because it's referring to those people in the society who are receiving no support. You see the issue they're having now with the welfare system, with the food stamp issues. The people don't want to get cut off. People have been cut off and they're crying the blues because they don't have money for all of the food that they used to buy, all of the Pop Tarts and the cereal and all of that stuff that they were spending their money on. Well, somebody said that ain't happening no more. So those people who consider themselves to be dependent, that's what they call them in their language. These are dependents on the system. All of those dependents are what are called nisa, whether they're males or females. If they do not have what it takes to support themselves independently, then they cannot be rijal. Rijal is connected to a word that has to do with legs and feet supporting the body independently. They're not leaning on their friend to make it down the block. They're not leaning on their parents to make it into the next town. They are themselves dependent on themselves, just like the legs and the feet are dependent on or depended on to get the body where it needs to be. These are important insights into Quranic language. Here are some of the meanings for the Arabic root word shaitan, or SHTN, Shin Tal Nun. To fasten, attach, distant, being distant or remote, far, firmly fixed, penetrating, concealed, turn away in opposition, design, aim, direction, pursuing, rope, long rope, twisted rope, excessively, inordinately, proud, corrupt, unbelieving, rebellious, insolent, audacious in pride, and in acts of rebellion, etc. That's a dictionary set of meanings for that root word that they're now giving us as shaitan. It was not originally shin, tau, nun. The word shaitan does not refer to an individual creature who needs to be shunned so that he does not cause us to burn in the hellfire. They say, watch out for the shaitan. Someone out there has their microphone open. Would you please check your own microphone? We can't do it for you. Is someone's mic out there? Mohammed, I'm not answering questions until the end of what I have to say here so I can get this finished. Then we'll open up for questions. But if your microphone is open, please close it. Thank you. It just makes editing a lot easier for me when I do that. And we won't go off course with a question that might be non-related. All right, this is almost the end of my presentation, so bear with us. The word shaitan does not refer to an invisible creature who needs to be shunned so that he does not cause us to burn in the hellfire. Shaitan is referring to an attribute of the human personality that we need to elevate ourselves above for purposes of living a more lofty, fruitful, and humanly rewarding life. So yes, we need to shun whatever this is that is being called a shaitan in the Quran, because it represents an influence that is directing or misdirecting something in the human personality, causing the human personality to take on characteristics and qualities that it was not intended to take on. Shaitan is an aspect of corruption which can grow in the human psyche, and it needs to be shunned. Any word containing shin, the SH sound at the beginning of it, has to do with separating from a central source. I want you to think about the word for the sun, shams. The sun has light rays that shoot out from its central body and goes in various directions. I want you to think about other words that begin with the SH sound. Shy in English. Shy means you've separated yourself from the central body and you've cornered yourself over in somewhere that you consider to be safe from people having to talk to you or look at you even, and that's shy. The word Shia in the Quran, it means people who have separated themselves into sects, sects. They've separated themselves. So the Arabic word shait, not shaitan, but this is where shaitan comes from because of the AAN ending that was given to it to represent volume, to represent that which is all over the place. The original word was shaped, and it's related to the English word, pardon my French, shit, which means clinically to separate oneself from something or someone by force if necessary. You see, this word shit was in the English vocabulary way before it became what they call a curse word. You can check it out in the dictionary of etymology that we use all of the time. It was in the science books in school back in the 1800s, early 1900s, and they removed it after deeming it to be an obscene word that should not be used in the public. I guess there was too much information in that word concerning what they were actually turning the people into. People who should be separated and shunned. The clinical word is evacuation. Your doctor will tell you that. He said, when was the last time you had an evacuation? He means, when was the last time you did number 2 in the bathroom? When we evacuate a building, it is for purposes of shutting, shielding, and shunning, etc., a possible danger away from us, separating ourselves from the danger. Well, when you do a number 2 in the potty, you are saving your body from having to suffer from an eventual danger that will happen if you cannot remove or move your bowels. You know that if you have an infant or if you have a toddler and you say, when was the last time you did something in your diaper or in the pot? Yeah, like 2 or 3 days ago. Well, no, that's too long. So they have to do things and get Q-tips and all kinds of medicines and Metamucil or whatever it is they're using out there to make sure that that baby's bowels become opened up again, because that stuff is poison. So I wanted to give you some cursory insight into how these words are being used in the Quran. And they're being used to give us deeper insight into human personality and human psychology. So I'm going to be dovetailing this particular lesson into my psychology class on Tuesday evening and giving them actually a deeper and more complex insight or level of insight into how these words are actually regulating the thoughts, the minds, the behaviors of people in our modern society.